So luckily, I just made it out of Dallas yesterday evening, and it looks like Dallas is getting hit with a bunch of snow right now. So I'm headed actually to San Jose to go to SMX West tomorrow morning. So I'm going to luckily avoid all that mess down there. They're starting to cancel flights and everything. So my first time here in Portland, and it's my great chance to eat lots of bacon while I'm here. So I think I had probably too many pieces of bacon this morning. A little bit about me: I'm a senior strategist at Globe Runner. We're based in Dallas. We also have offices in Fort Worth, Texas, and in Austin as well. And by the end of the year, we're expanding to Houston also. I was the original founder of the DFW SEM back in 2004. Started kind of as a group of us that we were kind of, at that point in 2004, we were sort of the black hatter type of SEOs, and we basically just wanted to get together and start trading links and trading secrets and so forth. And that actually turned out into a full-fledged organization. Now we're about 350 members or so, a monthly meeting, and we do the State of Search in November as well. I signed on last year with Majestic.com, which is the world's largest link database. I'm the U.S. brand ambassador along with Mel Carson, and if you know Mel. And I have a blog, BillHartzer.com, trying to post, and I've been doing organic SEO basically since 1996. We're doing a lot of affiliate sites and trying to manipulate the rankings for traffic back with Alta Vista and Excite, if you guys remember that. So basically, one of the things that we do at Globe Runner, I'm responsible for, is the SEO audits. So when we onboard a client and we have a brand new client come on, nobody, if we haven't done any. We don't know any history about that client. We definitely do one of these SEO audits. And so it's not, there are certain sections of it that actually tend to spur other SEO audits based on what we're finding here. So I've put it together into basically 3 different phases. And we first spend a bunch of time gathering the data, gathering as much data as we can. And that's kind of the gathering data phase. Then we have the analysis phase where I'm going through and actually analyzing what I found. And at the end, we're presenting results. So basically, ultimately, it could be in the form of a Microsoft Word document with a bunch of spreadsheets that we send off to the client that would go through in a meeting. It could be a PowerPoint presentation, or if it's just an audit that we're doing even in my own site. I'm basically going to end up with a task list of everything I need to fix at the end. So that's kind of the presentation results. We're going to kind of follow this with a theme here with a squirrel, because in fact, as I'm going through and doing an audit, all of a sudden I can see something that is that's odd. I say, hey, there's a squirrel, and I get kind of confused. Some of that things is I find this really weird thing going on with the site or something, and so I can then start focusing on that. But then I really need to know that in my whole task list here, I need to really keep on going and getting the rest of the data. So that's why I'm throwing a squirrel into this. So basically, before I begin, I want to get as much history and as much data as I can from the client. Obviously, Google Analytics access, Webmaster Tools access, Bing Webmaster Tools access. I want to know actually if they've ever hired an SEO firm in the past to do anything at all. I find a lot of agencies previously, some of our clients end up coming to us because we end up being the ones who fix all the problems, and so they've hired all these low budget, low quality, $500 a month SEO firms that were just building all sorts of spammy links and doing article links and article directory links and articles and so forth. And now we got to come clean it up. So whatever we can know, we need to know that past history. Also domain names. I'm actually a big domainer. I buy and sell a lot of domains, but I know that I've had a lot of issues with, with redirecting domains and links related to that, and that can really have a big effect as well. So I want to know all the domain names they own, all the, if they have any domains redirected currently to the site, a list of competitors, and I basically, one of the big questions that I ask that client is, is there anything else that I need to know? Because they will open up and start telling you stuff that you've never even thought of. And like the goals of the site, or it used to be another brand, or something that you may not actually be able to uncover. So we basically got all this information. So we start the gathering phase. The gathering phase basically is a situation where I'm sitting down and I've got Spotify on, and I'm just cranking up the tunes, and I'm going to gather all this data as I can. I'm going to have Microsoft Excel and Word open, and I like to have actually Notepad. So as I'm starting to pull reports and so forth, I'm saving everything into Excel, into Word. If there's a report that has a pretty graph or something, I might need that later for the actual document I send to the client to show some kind of results from analytics or something. So I'm pasting those screenshots. So I'm kind of going through as I start gathering this data. So I'm always doing that. So basically, I like to start first with basically go into Google, type in site:/domain.com, and seeing how many pages are indexed. Basically, Google's not going to show you, they might say that have 235,000 pages indexed, but you start to go down to in the end of search results, you'll see that number will change. We'll see, it's kind of important to me to know how many pages right now Google has indexed of that site. Okay, because I'm going to start, the next step is really to start to use some crawlers and crawl all those sites. So I'm going to start crawling the sites. Want to get a page count and see, what kind of subdomains are out there, how they're doing in Google right now. First is, I know a lot of people probably are familiar with Screaming Frog, but it's a Screaming Frog SEO spider. It's free to spider sites up to 500 pages. It's about $100 a year. Any time after once you can stop that limit. And I'm currently actually working on an audit of a site that's completely in Greek. I don't speak any Greek, but I'm doing an SEO audit of this site. It's 362,000 pages. And I'd be able to tweak Screaming Frog to crawl all those pages. The Screaming Frog is one of those things that I just basically am using every day. And at this point, so it's like it's a crawler. So what it's going to do is it's going to literally visit every single page of the site and start saving the title tags, the meta description tags, H1 tags, header server errors. For example, if it would hits a 404 error, it's going to start saving all that. So I'm going to start, run that and let that run that on the site. Screaming Frog is a way you can actually export. If you want a list of all the 404 errors on the site, you can export that into an Excel spreadsheet. You can see all the missing title tags you can export, and all this really cool data. I'm not really going to, it's just a tool that I use together. And so I'm saving those and exporting and kind of starting to look at the results. So OptiSpider is this tool that not too many people know about, but I can't do an SEO audit without running OptiSpider on a site. It's just the way it's one of these really, really old style tools out there. So basically, so it does some calculation. So OptiSpider, you start running on it. Basically, it's going to look at all of your internal links. Okay, what it's going to do is it's going to figure out what the main topic for that page is on the site, and it's going to compare all the internal anchor text with that topic. And if there's a match, if it's a privacy policy page and your page is about privacy policy based on your H1 tag and your title tag, and you mentioned privacy policy in the text, then obviously all the internal links to that page you want them to say privacy policy and point to that page. We're looking for matches like that. There's other data like how many pages it found and basically the site-wide topic. So it does other calculations like that. And internal link counts and all that. So some of that data also is helpful to save. Integrity is one of those, it's another crawler. It also they have another version of it called Scrutiny. And basically it crawls sites and looks for 404 errors. For some reason, it's only a Mac-only product. And there's a free version and a paid version. But basically, I have found that by using Screaming Frog and crawling a site, then using OptiSpider, and then actually using Integrity, okay, between those three, that's going to find all the pages on the site. Integrity does the way it's written and the way it's coded, it will find more errors than those other tools. So I just really like to find that. Obviously, you can also export. It does, checks pages for W3C compliance as well. So basically, at this point, we've gone through Screaming Frog. I've crawled the site. I've crawled the site with OptiSpider. I've crawled the site with Integrity. SiteLiner. SiteLiner is the next tool that I run. So SiteLiner is basically looks at duplicate content. It's by Copyscape. It's a paid tool, and essentially it identifies all of the duplicate content on your site, and so there are certain pages that are going to have sections of content that are duplicated on several pages. There are going to be certain pages that have more duplicate content than others. And obviously with Panda and so forth, and the Panda algorithm, this is a really, this is one thing that you can use to identify and start cleaning up some of the duplicate content on your site. You can actually go down into each page. This was a page on my blog, a post, and it actually color codes which parts of the content on that specific page are the duplicates, and whether it's footer content, sidebar content, whatever. So that's you could spend probably several hours even working on this and looking at that. So going to digging in a little bit more. Bing Webmaster Tools. Bing Webmaster Tools really very helpful. They give a lot more data about errors and pages crawled and so forth. And you can actually go and dig in with Webmaster Tools, and actually, they give you all these errors to fix. So basically, a lot of this, then obviously you can export some of this. So I'm staking notes and I'm saying, okay, these particular pages, there's a problem with image alt tags, alt attributes, and so forth. And so even though Screaming Frog shows you the image alt attributes as well, it's also, Bing Webmaster Tools also shows you. So like I said, I'm still gathering this data, making notes, fix the image alt attributes on these particular pages. Webmaster Tools, search queries, search counts. Unfortunately, it's only back as far as 90 days. I have heard that they're going to expand that, but if there's some kind of big drop-off, big change, this, you can start digging into that, making changes. Webmaster Tools, basically the biggest section, there's two major sections. Number one, I look at and see if the site has a manual penalty, and that's gonna be very helpful. And then there's the HTML improvements. HTML improvement section, again, you can export these, show you, long title tags, short title tags, meta descriptions, and so forth. The site errors, as well, especially with mobile and versus desktop, that's being increasingly important as well. Moz campaign. I basically start a Moz campaign for the site and let Moz just go through the site and figure out what's any errors, any good positives. Some of these, we can screen capture graphs. We can save those for later in our report. Moz, the whole theme here, as you can see, I'm using multiple tools because there's not really one tool that's going to do everything. And so some will have different data, some might be correct, some might not be, so I'm just a data freak, and I just like to run all sort of stuff to basically make sure I have covered everything possible. SEMrush also has, basically two things. I want to look at the traffic here, and that graph at the top that's kind of blue, that line that kind of goes up and kind of goes down. In that case, I'm looking for any panda or penguin issues. If, in the traffic of the past 2 years, if there was a huge drop-off in that traffic one time, there's going to be probably a panda or penguin issue, some kind of penalty, some kind of, something like that. This site is pretty typical, hasn't really suffered much. They have the separate, obviously you can dig into the keyword data as well and the rankings and so forth. They have a separate site audit that's in beta right now. It still works really good. Again, they really go into even duplicate content issues, narrow down the top 3 issues that they see on the site, site speed, and give you a score and so forth. So again, some pretty graphs to put in your SEO audit at the end. Log files. I've already, so even before Google Analytics come around, back in when Google was, I was actually before, in the 90s looking at log files and log file data. And basically we didn't have as many crawlers as we do now. And so it made it a little easier back then to look at log files. Weblog storming, get a copy of the website's log files, past day, past week, past month. Run weblog storming. You can actually start digging into, seeing actually the 404 errors on the server. Quick hits. You can probably see the 404 errors and maybe recover some traffic to the site. See if there's, look at those 404 pages that are airing out and see if actually there's any digging in to see if there's any links to those pages. So basically, and another thing is that we can look at, whether or not which bots are actually viewing which pages. And so a lot of that we can see. For example, there was a site I was working on that Google really refused to stop crawling the site's product pages in particular. So digging into the actual log file data, you're able to see why. Weblog storming has a 30-day free trial. And then AW stats is actually something. It's still, we'll show you errors, error and user agents and so forth, and errors on the site. Most sites that have cPanel and that have cPanel hosting will have AW stats, or analog is another one. So basically, that's kind of that first section of gathering a lot of data. Then I'm going to start going into the internal site structure of the site. So I'm going to actually do a manual review of the site. Sit down and just start clicking on the site as if I'm a user and start looking at the navigation and see if there's any kind of funky thing going on where I click on the, highlight a navigation and it goes down to navigation and then, subcategories and has subcategories and so, issues, navigational issues I start making notes about, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a manual, so I may spend even a couple hours just clicking through the site and making notes, screen captures and so forth of issues I see. I'll review the site source code, the page source, to see if there's anything that I can clean up on the code. Look at also the URLs. I mean, are they using session IDs? Are they using parameters in the URLs where we can change those parameters to keywords and so forth. Basically, you want to make sure that the site isn't grouped into topics. That there's not that a weird navigation where most product pages and sites will have categories, and then e-commerce sites will have categories, and then the products will be on the under categories. But there are sites where sometimes I was dealing with a site last week that had categories, product pages that appeared in more than one category, and they were actually ended up being duplicated over and over and over again. And you couldn't, as you started to dig through and search the site, you kind of felt that you're saying the same product over and over again. Also, URL structure, I'm looking at, I mentioned parameters. I'm going to spend probably an hour or so looking through in-page analytics and Google Analytics to see where actually the percentages with those little bubbles, where people are clicking on the home page and which links they're clicking through, and seeing it based on conversion data. So basically at this point, I'm probably out into probably 6 or 8 hours into this SEO audit, just digging through all this data, depending on the size of the site. So now it's time to gather offsite data. It's not just about the tree that the squirrel's in. It's actually other trees and and everything that's linking over. So Webmaster Tools links. A quick review. Webmaster Tools is not going to give you all of the links. They're not going to. They're just they don't want to give away the farm. But they're going to give you some in some cases. This social media informer.com has 120,000 pages linking to my site. There's an issue maybe there. I want to see if there's a site-wide link or something like that. And then this other bottom section is how your site is linked. If there's some really weird keywords in there, you might find something in there that you need to start investigating. And then your top pages, most links to the home page or most links to other pages and so forth. So Ahrefs, there's a couple different tools, Ahrefs and Majestic SEO. Ahrefs, I like to look at the referring pages and how many links that has. It looks like in this site the number of links every month is kind of going down over time. I want to actually make sure that it starts to go up over time. And they had a bunch of links and now it's been dropping off. So now we kind of need to get the link velocity flowing. It's something on show. That's that left graph over there. The anchor text cloud on my particular site, brand phrase, the biggest phrases. We don't want to over optimization at this point. Again, some different graphs to show later on in the document. Majestic SEO is probably the most accurate and updated every hour. This is the summary page when you go to majestic.com and look at the links for a root domain. In this case, I'm looking at the trust flow and the citation flow. We want the trust flow and citation flow to be as close together as possible. And when you get a case where the citation flow is much higher, talking about 30 or 40, even 40 points higher than the trust flow, we tend to see there's probably an issue with some bad links and low quality links pointing to the site, with the citation flow being a little higher. Kind of spotting, seeing if there's how many root domains and referring IPs are linking to the site. Looking at the topics, one thing that Majestic does that some of these other link tools really do not do is they'll actually categorize the sites by topic. So basically, the sites that are linking to you, this computer, internet, and web page topic. Those are the majority of the links that are linking to my site are in the computer, internet, and web page topic. If it was something else, when we started getting into shopping, I write about SEO topics and social media and domain topics. I don't want to really necessarily a bunch of shopping sites linking to me. So, it could be a former client. So looking through this list of topics, my particular site has a lot of different topics. Obviously, if you're in healthcare, you want majority of probably healthcare and news websites linking to you rather than just shopping or retail or food or something like that. Again, you starting looking into the topics, you see something that's amiss here, you can actually see what links and which sites and kind of dig in even further. This could just open up a whole other can of worms, another day or two of analysis. Mentioned the trust flow and the citation flow. Pretty big factors. Kind of trust flow. Those factors are basically 1 to 100. We want the trust flow and citation flow to be as close as possible. This site has a really bad problem with low quality India related article directories and links and so forth. There's a lot of really low quality, low trusted links pointing to this site. So in this case, the citation flow is really high. Trust flow, we want the trust flow to be higher ultimately than the citation flow. Anchor text, good, anchor text review. You can see all the anchor text and what topics that are linked into the site. You can start digging into actually the links. Anchor text review, ultimately on a high level, we want the brand phrases to be much more prominent than, say, something, than the keyword-rich anchor text phrases. So the more we can have brand phrases and have it, sort of unoptimized anchor text, then a more natural, then basically that, it's going to be better, that Google's going to like it better. URI delay. So we're starting to get into checking server headers and checking some issues. If a lot of sites will, now it's good to redirect www to the non-www, or non-www to www.domain.com. We don't want two versions. We want two separate versions. If those redirects, if they're doing the redirect, we want to make sure that there's not multiple redirects, one redirect to another, maybe a 302 to a 301 to a 302 to a 301, and then hitting the home page. We basically just want one single redirect. And there's also other server things we can look at here. We're looking at the server headers. Webpagetest.org, looking for overall site performance, the time to the first pixel. How long does it take from the site when we first request it to the first pixel that's delivered? We want that fast, and we want as fast as possible. Again, it's good to kind of show the client, if they're not really too much about SEO, how their website is performing, if they're on a shared server versus a dedicated IP, and so forth. This is something we can dig into, and then you can start to look at the overfall waterfall they call it, of which files on that home page are linking. So it's starting to get into a phase now where we're starting to look at server headers. We're still gathering this data. There's a lot of sort of miscellaneous things that are not really on page and they're not really off page things that I like to check. So I mentioned kind of site speed. I mean, we did some site speed. I like kind of compare one or two site speed tools. And then we also want to do a DNS server check, basically to see if the DNS is set up properly, especially with the certificates with HTTPS and so forth. I've had cases where clients have had their DNS hacked, and so when you went to one version of their site, it pulled up their site, but you went to the secure version, it went to even a completely other site. So some of that can be detected in this in the DNS settings tests. So we get into the site, in analytics, Google Analytics. We're going to start looking at spend some time. I like to spend probably, depending on the amount of time I have for the audit. Started to dig into which pages are loading fast and which pages are loading slow. And that can be, issues, kind of starting to look into the most popular pages on the site and figuring out, okay, well, are there certain pages that are converting well or not converting well because they're not loading very well, not very fast. So we could probably spend a few hours probably just looking at page, site speed and page load times in Google Analytics and the analytics. I like to look at the robots.txt. Easiest client I had was basically they didn't know why they were ranking in Google and went to robots.txt, domain.com/robots.txt, and it said disallow all. So basically, my time was done and I charged them $1,000. I said, I charged them, $1,500 to basically fix that one issue. They had some other things, but that was basically. What I'm finding lately is that a lot of sites, WordPress sites, Joomla sites in particular, Joomla has this weird thing where if you're using the default CMS file for the robots.txt, Joomla likes to actually disallow all the entire images folder, and that's in the default. And so there are some kind of weird things. So just basically a review. I'm seeing so many sites. I had three client sites last week who they're using this allow directive, that they want to allow certain directories. If you're looking at the actual syntax of robots.txt, there's nothing anywhere that says there's no allow directive. It just doesn't exist. So you're just, so I don't know if the search engines are looking at that or not, but there's no allow directive, so you delete it. Obviously, you can specify the sitemap location. Typically, it's sitemap.xml, but if you have multiple sitemaps, which is just fine, you can have up to thousands of URLs in each sitemap. In a case where you have a 350,000 page site, you're going to have multiple sitemaps. You can specify all of those in the robots.txt file. And then I'm looking for, actually at this point, I'm looking for directives that can kind of conflict with other signals. So these other signals can be canonical tags on the site, and then if you're using canonical tags properly, but then you're in the robots.txt, you're disallowing certain folders and directories that can conflict and cause problems. So there's kind of an analysis that be done 10-15 minutes or so to look at the robots.txt file. Sitemaps, basically you want to submit the sitemap to Google, there definitely can be issues with multiple sitemaps. Sometimes WordPress and some of these other CMSs, you'll make a page on the site and it will not be populated automatically on the sitemap, and so there's issues there. So really a strong review of the sitemaps. So all these miscellaneous issues. I've kind of looked at subdomains before, but one big thing is these wildcard subdomains. There's a way to have those turned on in some servers. So I could literally go to your site and type in billhartzer.whatever.com, and it'll be a completely duplicate site and of your main www.domain.com. And so those wildcard subdomains really tend to be issues, especially when if somebody actually happens to link to one, then obviously there can be an issue with duplicate content and so forth. So I like to actually now use directories rather than subdomains. So if you're using the site's using multiple subdomains, I'd like to move some of that content. Actually would prefer domain.com/blog rather than blog.domain.com. Some of those issues, at this point, I'm looking for subdomain issues. Canonical tags, I mentioned, conflicting with other signals like nofollow and robots.txt, and even directives in the meta robots in the header, some of those. So that can definitely be kind of tricky to use as well. Canonical. Structured data. Most sites really, a lot of sites will just use the markup, schema.org markup for local addresses if they're actually using it at all. But now there's such a big advantage with reviews. You can have, if you have reviews on your site that are unique reviews, and those as long as those reviews are not from in Google or in Yelp, they're unique reviews, you can actually mark them up, and they will put Google will show the 5 stars, 4 stars in your search result. And that kind of, most sites don't use those stars and reviews in the schema, and so it'll kind of it's a good way to highlight your site in the search results. Events, you can mark up people, places, and organizations. In the real estate space, I've got a real estate client, and they have 40 or 50 different realtors in that office, and each one has a bio. And so I've actually started marking up, every realtor, their bio, especially on listings that it's their particular real estate listing. So, and on that listing page, we mark up the person who owns that listing. There's real estate tags. There's it seems like every time I go to schema, there's other more tags that you can implement. Especially products and offers. you can mark up as well. Local listings. So I'm on this high level audit. I'm going to kind of also look at the Google Places listing, the Bing Places for Business, the Yahoo local listings. Right at this point, I'm just going to look at those high level ones to see if they've actually verified and claimed their Google My Business listing, and the same thing with Bing and Yahoo. That'll kind of spur another question is whether or not we need to audit the listings. And so we have a couple of guys in our office who are really, really good at local citations and auditing the local listings and dealing with Yext and Moz Local and so forth. And so that'll kind of determine whether or not I need to get them involved to start looking at every single listing to make sure the name, address, and phone number and the NAP data is actually exactly the same on all the listings. So that could be another audit that we order based on kind of some initial findings in this overall SEO audit. Again, local citations, Moz Local, easy to put in the information in there, and it'll tell you, whether or not it has detected duplicate listings, and so forth, and whether you need to order a new, a citation audit. That can take, depending on, the size of the business and number of locations and all that, that could take a couple days to get that audit done. So we've gathered all this data. We've got the really fat squirrel. He's got all this data. We need in this next analysis phase, and we kind of need to start analyzing the data, making assumptions, recommendations. If I'm looking at the squirrel, I'd say you're fat, you need to exercise, and so forth. I like to be really blunt with everything and say, look, you've got a manual penalty. It's going to take 6 months to get these links removed and get you back on track. But, okay, maybe not too much, but I like to start thinking about analyzing that data. So looking for obvious issues, I have my notes, and at this point I'm looking for obvious issues that I'm going to kind of put up towards the top of the list and actually start, at that point, start making notes, but kind of organizing and say, hey, these are the really big issues I've found so far. These are the quick hits and so forth that I need to really start focusing in. Analytics. So I've already crawled the site, but at this point I'm analyzing. So I want to look for changes over time, year-over-year data. It was January a really slow month last month, and if that was the case, then is that a seasonal thing that people are not doing, or not buying houses in January because there's last month there was a snowstorm up in Boston, or those seasonal factors we kind of need to start analyzing and looking at. Hopefully at this point you've got some conversion data going. One of the things when I first get access to analytics, I like to go in immediately and see if they have any conversion goals set up, and if that case I kind of go in and just set up some goals, because it takes maybe a week or so to get this audit done. And in that case, I have some time to actually maybe get some conversion data to start to show. Bounce rates are coming more and more increasingly. Are people pogo sticking? Are they going from the search results to your site and hitting the back button and going back? So pages per session, any big drops in traffic, Panda, Penguin issues, kind of analyzing analytics, plenty of time. Panda, Penguin issues. So I'm looking at verifying that drops in traffic in SEMrush analytics, and kind of taking that data and looking at the Google algorithm change history. So actually what happens is Moz is keeping track of every single Google update that's announced publicly, and tells you what data had happened. So you can line up a drop in traffic with the actual Google update and what happened on that date. There's a Penguin tool which basically does the same thing. You load your analytics in there, and Barracuda Digital out of the UK has this tool, and it loads analytics and looks at lines up all the dates that Panda or Penguin happened, and shows you easily on your analytics of whether or not there was a the site was hit by panda or penguin. So I'm still, analyzing keyword data, rankings. I know a lot of sites don't really track rankings anymore, but some do. In that case, there are keyword opportunities. They're ranking on the second page. Maybe there's some keywords that we could tweak some things and get a few new links, tweak title tags and content and so forth, get some social traffic to that page, and get them from the second page to the first page, within a few days. Those are some quick hits. I'm kind of looking at the keyword data, Webmaster Tools Search Query Report. There's a new search impact report that some people have access to in Webmaster Tools that goes a little bit further into the search queries and so forth. So at this point, I'm looking, spending probably a couple hours looking at keyword data and rankings. So basically, I've pulled all of that data from all those tools. I'm looking at title, I'm going back to Screaming Frog. I'm going back to OptiSpider and some of these. I'm looking at title tags, meta descriptions, headings. Looking for duplicate heading tags on blank heading tags, H1 tags. So kind of at this point, analyzing and spending time really seeing what are the biggest changes and what that we need to make with the on-page site data, and that'll be a whole section of content that I'll write about what needs to be fixed at that point. Again, analyzing on a little bit, overall topic focus, internal duplicate content, not enough unique content. I'm asking myself all these questions. Internal links, are there internal links, to pages that really don't have much content? Navigation, footer links, copyright symbol. If it's 2015 now, if they have a 2009 copyright, I might kind of change that. Just extra things to throw in there. Offsite data, link velocity, anchor text, diversity at anchor text, and all these things. Basically at this point, going through this list. Basically it's kind of a checklist at this point to make sure in this analysis phase to make sure we've kind of covered everything. I like to run a link detox report from Link Research Tools to see if there's any bad or toxic low quality links. This case about 60% of the links were very low risk. They were probably good links, and there were only about 0.9% of the links were very high risk, and 13% were high risk links to this particular site. So, not really a big problem with low quality links, but still probably some links that we'd probably recommendation would be to review the links and get rid of the toxic links. So we're now finally at the end, into this presentation phase. Basically, we want to show these results. We want to basically make it look good, determine an action plan, implementation plan. So at this point, hopefully at this point, I know whether or not this is going to be an internal document where basically I have just a list of everything that needs to be fixed on the site, and I can go in on and start FTPing the site and going into WordPress and start fixing things. That's internally. If I have access to the site and I have permission from the client to go in and fix. There's other situations where we're dealing with offsite developers and or the client has their own developers. So I actually need a formal document. I need to know who's going to actually implement, do the implementation. Whether or not actually in that document do I need to write out and spell out actually every single page that, and give a spreadsheet of, this needs to change to this on this page, or if I can just, work, we need to know who's implementing in-house changes. Basically, most cases I end up with a Microsoft Word document and a list of spreadsheets with all the data, and I'm pointing to different spreadsheets. And there's some cases where it's more formal and I'm actually putting together a Word doc, but also I'm actually having a PowerPoint with all the major points of things with screen captures that need to be changed. So finally, the document itself, it's a Word document. We're actually looking at basically, this is kind of the way I put it together: a cover page, table of contents, write out a summary with some bullet points of what are the biggest things and the quick hits and the major things that they, do they have a problem with links, or do they have a problem with duplicate content? What is the overall, what's the CEO is going to read that first page and they're, and what do they need to be fixed first? I go into the website crawlability, so that's going to be like all the technical things about crawling and 404s and 301 issues and what's good, bad, and so forth. Then I'm getting into a whole section of the document that's site architecture issues, keyword issues, optimizing the content, and so forth. Then finally, a linking section, internal links issues, external links, how is their link profile overall, and then basically the overall recommendations. And that's the overall recommendations is basically kind of a almost duplicate of the overview, but it's actually, fix these on-site issues, fix these issues, and so forth. And then here's the action plan. So actually, finally, we get into a list of priorities. I mean, I'm going to list a list of all the priorities, all the priority issues that really need to be fixed first. Are there any quick hits? And then this action plan for implementing. That's where I start to take tasks and start delegating tasks to everybody. So overall, I mean, most of my audits like this finally are typically anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, depending on the size of the site. It could be a smaller site, 5 or 10 pages site audit. A smaller site, I might be able to get through everything in a day, but just kind of depends on the site. You can definitely, this is kind of the whole process. I didn't really have enough time to go into, any optimization issues at this point, but I wanted to show you what I actually go through in the process in my thinking of gathering the data, analyzing the data, and then presenting the data. Any questions? We can get into a Q&A session, and I think we have time for some questions. Thanks.
For hands.
What's the difference between SiteLiner and just what Copyscape already provides?
So Copyscape is actually, Copyscape provides, you put your site in Copyscape, and Copyscape is actually comparing your site with other content on the web on other sites. Whereas SiteLiner is actually doing a crawl only of your site and looking for duplicate content only on your site. It doesn't compare any of that content with anything that anybody who is like a scraper site or anything like that. It's just crawling your particular site and dealing with kind of more Panda related issues with duplicate content on your site.
Okay.
Mark in the back here.
Thanks a lot, Bill, by the way. That was really good. Nice overview. We have some sites that are, their business is annual in nature, and a great example would be like an event site that happens every year, or a tax-related site where they get a spike of traffic, say, for 2 months out of the year. And after that, it's pretty dormant. But we had a really hard time finding tools that can help us analyze that data other than GA and server logs. There's just not a lot of interest in it, or there's no money in it or something. I was curious if you've ever ran across something that can handle spikes like that and get in deep.
Well, I mean, what type of, you mentioned, looking at the analytics and looking at the log, I mean, looking at the data, what type of other information that you're wanting to pull?
Keyword research, one example. What keywords are they? Keyword opportunities, for example, because there's not a lot of search traffic when the site's not in that season, if you will.
Sure.
So we see things that are happening right then, but then we're trying to plan for the following year.
Yeah, so I actually tend to rely a lot on SEMrush because SEMrush, not only just is, it's not really connected to your particular, it's not connected to your site. It actually, you can look up almost any site out there. Even, competitors, even kind of a similar event maybe in another state, that type of, you can actually look back for the past several years of keyword history. And there are also, start to pull in related phrases. And then actually one interesting thing is not just organic, but actually the paid traffic. And you could theoretically look at a competitor event that happened, a couple months ago or even last year, 2 years ago. And maybe they did some paid, they did some Google AdWords for, maybe a month before the event. And so you can actually pull everything from the keywords they bid on, how much they bid. You can actually look at the ad copy they used. So all that is there in SEMrush. So that kind of, and that, other than looking at your own, your own data, and unfortunately, we have much more not provided data now through Google Analytics than we had before. So, in a case where that's probably the next step of where I would go is SEMrush and try and start digging in.
And we have a question over here.
When you're presenting this data, like especially to the client at the end, how do you keep it from overwhelming them with if they have just lots of errors? How do you keep it from them just going this is too much for us to deal with, or how do you get them to kind of deal with that issue?
Well, it kind of depends, and typically it will be a case where they're sitting down with the client and we print out the report, or actually doing it like in a GoToMeeting, for example, and we start going through the Word doc. And so I got all that information in there, and I kind of right at the beginning, I kind of try and gauge ask some questions to kind of figure out what their level of understanding is. Are they someone who is at our level that can really understand what a 404 error is, versus somebody who's basically a non-marketing person who just wants to know that we're on top of things. And so you kind of have to, in that meeting, or on that call, kind of start kind of engaging their level of expertise and how much they know. And what will happen is we go through that Google document and start giving them the high level, and then they'll probably start asking some questions, and you can know whether based on their questions, whether they're really intelligent questions, SEO related questions, or something just that seems like a stupid question to us. So then what actually ends up happening is I start going through, and as we're scrolling through the document, I end up with, if they're high level, then I will actually just gloss over, certain sections. And if it starts to get into areas where, page load speed and so forth, and, I'll just say, okay, well, your site's slow. We probably need to change to another better server. To speed up the website. And sort of, it kind of is how I present it. I like to actually give everything there, because they might hand that document to the, to their IT person who's not on the call or something. So at least it's there. I feel comfortable that I've done my job, and so it's kind of, even that call is iffy because I don't know who's going to actually be on, if they're going to pull in the CEO of the company and he's going to be on that call. So it kind of it's down to the presentation. I mean, I like to give everything in that document, but again, it's how you present it.
So what do you use to determine what's high priority, and when somebody's saying that's going to cost me, $10,000 to fix, justifying that that's worthwhile to them?
Yeah, good question. There's some cases where yeah, some cases now, for example, we need, if a site is not mobile friendly and they do, they do sell things, and they get, a fair amount of mobile traffic, we know Google's gonna, Google's actually going to start, having ranking issues for mobile pretty soon, if not already. And so a lot of sites are legacy sites, and they are not mobile optimized. So in that case, some cases where we basically have to tell them we need to redesign the site, and that, or they need to redesign the site and kind of start giving them a time frame and start working towards that. Then we're actually going to kind of give them some see if there's any quick hits that we can do now that on the current site that, okay, we know, and they typically they say, okay, well, we know we need to redesign the site, so we're going to start working on that. But then I kind of caveat that with say, okay, well, we know that's the plan, but let's see what we can do right now, in the next 2 to 3 weeks to really start getting, some better rankings, some better, are there any quick hits? So we kind of gloss over that, we put that in their minds, and then we try and convince them that there's some things that we can just do right now on the site. So it's kind of a combination. I mean, every kind of site owner is, and the situation tends to be different, and so you kind of have to present all the information and then figure out how you're going to get them to, convince them to hire you to continue, monthly SEO service, if you will. And so you kind of have to work with them a lot.
But what do you use to say this is still important?
Mm-hmm.
This used to be important, but the search engines have got around that. They figured it out. They're compensating or whatever to know kind of what are the top.
I think it's a tough question. It really is. I don't think there's anything specific. I mean, I think I've done so many audits of sites that at this point, it's kind of more of an intuition to figure out, okay, these are the more important things to fix now, rather than later. Let me come back. Let me think about it and come back.
I had a quick question on the allow directive, in the robot text.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of conflicting information on the web about that. Now, are you suggesting we should not use the allow directory or directive at all?
Yeah, I look at the actual the robots.txt. There's a site, robots.txt.org, or one of the official site, and yeah, I mean, if I see the allow directive, I just basically ignore it. I mean, I recommend at this point to just delete it.
So as a corollary to the earlier question, what can we not do? What can we ignore? So for example, I currently ignore title tags that are too long. I figure I could go in and fix all of those, but it's going to truncate and it's okay. Is that a right assumption? And what are some other assumptions like that, yeah, if we had infinite dollars and infinite time from the client, we'd fix it all. But which are the ones that are really at the bottom of the list and you'd say, set those aside, do those last?
Looking at the like title tags, I mean, is it? My really question is that whatever it is, if it's a title tag or if it's something on the site or if it's a type of link or internal or something, the real question is this, to me, is this over optimization? Is that, is it keyword stuffing? Is it something that, potentially is Google just going to ignore, and it's okay and it can slide for now? But if it's a case where, where those title tags are long because you're mentioning the keyword like 2 or 3 times, then you get into kind of, okay, well, that's an over optimization. Is that meta description tag, 3 paragraphs long, or the major? So that's kind of really the ultimate question. Is this something that you're suggesting that, okay, well, it's okay, it's the title tags are fine for now, because there's a lot of them, but is it a case where somebody in the past, those title tags are there and they're long because they tried to stuff a bunch of keywords in it, or are there, is there a case where, in the footer of the homepage, or, are there just link after link after link after link just to get keyword stuff, links in that? So that's really kind of the question, is that I'm trying to get rid of the over-optimization, and that's really the, I would say, the answer to it.
Hi, Bill. My question was about query strings, and when you're gathering all your data, for example, like in Screaming Frog, do you tell it to ignore query strings and just go for the base URL? Because otherwise you could take a 10,000 page site to easily several 100,000 if especially on like e-commerce site that uses filtered nav, or do you have it pull everything and just when you're doing the analysis focus on the base?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, it really comes down to time and how much time I have to, and how much they're paying for this audit. Are they paying, $1,500 for a one-time audit, and I can give them the high level, or if it's a $50,000 audit, and I'll have 2 or 3 people start to dig into all that query data and see if there's anything that we can really you can see in there. It ultimately comes down to hours and what we have time for, because I mean, with certain keywords, a lot of these tasks are something that you could probably spend a week on, and kind of have to figure out, okay, what's on a high level. I mean, this is, we've gone into the technical things, but on a high level, how much can we, do next month? The next month we'll maybe tackle the search query stuff and spend, 2 or 3 weeks on those search queries, versus right now we're going to try and spend, on their major ranking, keywords that give them the biggest conversions right now.
I'm sorry, I was actually talking about the URL query string, so not for
So-
but so like sort order or filter attributes, or particularly for e-commerce sites, use filtered navigation, and they're adding in all those color, size, or brand, or manufacturer, where it can really significantly change the content page or not, depending on what those.
Yeah, so the actual URLs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of is obviously, I really like to get that data into and not have parameters in the URL, which are numbers or just meaningless characters. And so, I mean, it definitely is. That's kind of an overall plan of changing the URLs, because that's going to be, you start changing URLs, you're going to have to set up a plan for redirecting and all that. So that can actually, that will take some time. There is, it definitely is a fairly good ranking factor to have those keywords in the URLs. So ultimately, 6 months down the road, we would want to move towards that. And but as far as the grand scheme of things, as long as Google can crawl those pages and we've taken care of the canonical issues, then having the keywords in the URL and working on that sort of task or that project is not, I wouldn't say it's it's really extremely important. There's other things like, the other things, even fixing title tags and image alt text on those, and so forth, that might be a little higher priority.
My question is in relation to schema.org markup. And as the markup gets more and more granular with that, I'm finding that businesses that offer related or services, different services that are related to kind of the same thing, have an option to, for example, like an auto dealer also provides service and parts.
Yep.
And those are different items in schema. Would you recommend to a client to optimize for all of those individual things, or maybe go a step up in the schema and optimize for the general?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you add, if you can add add those, that's going to give you just a leg up on your competition, because mostly the other sites that are, your other, if there's an auto dealer, the other auto dealer is probably not going to be doing that. And so that's going to give, Google really, really likes schema right now. I mean, the other thing is that you got to realize, though, that ultimately everything that you mark up, okay, using schema.org, basically is giving Google the authority to use that data however they want. Okay, so there's not any copyright, so once you kind of essentially, if you're marking up something on your site, Google can then use that, and there's no you're giving away that copyright to that data. So then Google actually can take that data and display it in their search results and not compensate you. So kind of in that theme, I mean, you're weighing, what data you're actually going to mark up to give Google to show, because they can show that data in the search results, and somebody may not have to click to your site. So you could lose some traffic depending on what data you give out. If it's a case where it's just, where it's makes and models and manufacturer numbers and all that, then you're marking up, then that's probably something that is going to benefit you only because the other site's not using schema. I'd say probably one, I mean, in a lot of industries, there's only maybe one site that'll use schema markup, and some, other industries more and more. But it's pretty, not many sites are using schema.
I have a follow-up question with that. Is there a Bing schema markup program or not?
Schema.org actually is an alliance between basically the major search engines, Yahoo, Google, and Bing, and so they actually got together and agreed together to make these standards, and so it's kind of. Same thing with the Google, with the knowledge graph out there, and a lot of that information on freebase.com and Wikipedia. It's basically all, the search engines decided together and said, okay, we need more standardization for some kind of marked up data for that websites can do to help us. And it's a group effort between Google, Yahoo, and Bing primarily to make those standards.
I was wondering, I'm about to do a SEO site audit on a large site, like I'm not sure how many pages, maybe 1 million pages or something like that. Do you have any tips for sort of tackling a website that large and using like crawling software on a site that large?
Yeah, so typically, the site I'm doing right now, 365,000 pages. The only way I was able to is I went to got a Windows Azure server. It's a cloud server in Microsoft Data Center, and I configured that server with about 50 gig of memory, and you can tweak. Screaming Frog has a config file. We can basically tell Screaming Frog how much memory to use on that box while you're running it. And basically you put in the URL, and as long as you have enough memory, it'll, excuse the pun, but it'll scream through that crawl.
What would you do? How do you comb through all that data once you got it?
It's kind of interesting because a lot of it, I'm exporting all the 404 errors and so forth. I'm looking at. I will export a fair amount to Excel and kind of in chunks, and a lot of it is literally just opening up Screaming Frog and sorting. They do have they do have kind of a summary on the side that you can sort of look through some of it, and so I kind of take some of it out and then and do it piece by piece. What I found is a lot of, the site that I'm working on right now on the audit, there's certain just sections that have, tens and, 50,000 pages that's an event calendar, and it's taking up a lot of that. And so a lot of that I will, even in Screaming Frog, you can disallow certain sections and folders when it's crawling. So if you find that basically it's an event calendar that's creating thousands and thousands of pages, run the crawl again and disallow that section and say, okay, we know this is duplicate content. We need to deal with this separately. And so you kind of maybe have to run it a couple times and kind of tweak it.
Do you have any like Excel plugins that you use over and over again to like find duplicates and things like that? Other add-ins that make that part of the analysis quicker?
There's good question. There's a few out there, but a lot of it is I can do actually right in Excel, and some of these tools like Screaming Frog and some of the other tools will actually allow you to export reports like all the pages that are duplicate title tags, and so some of that is helpful, is already kind of built into some of the tools. And then other than putting like looking at title tags and sorting them by alphabetically, sorting the URLs alphabetically, and so forth. That's most of that. So there's not really anything fancy here, to do at this point, to do anything as far as that goes. So I'm not. So to answer your question, there's not really anything. Any macros or scripts that I'm using.
When you use the cite command for the domain, Google only gives you 7 pages in the results. Do you have any tips on seeing the indexed URLs?
Yeah. So basically, I try and kind of narrow down by subdomain or even by section. So you can do site:/domain.com minus site:/www.domain.com, and then you can also add in minus certain folders and directories, so that you can actually do one that certainly get. You could do a site:/, you want all the products, so you do a site:/domain.com/products, and you get that whole section, and you can grab those, and then do it folder by folder, and then you can obviously do a minus site:/ and make that search string even longer. So it kind of takes some time. I like to have the show at least 100 results at one time. There's a couple different kind of JavaScript buttons you can put on that will, you can hit a button in Firefox and it will export all those URLs into text, into a text list that you can copy. So there's kind of different ways to do that. There's also, if you have Scrapebox will help you basically get a lot of those URLs too.
Any more questions? We have time for one more.
If not, just find me. I'm here all day and all night. So, and I leave Portland tomorrow morning. So, I'm ready.
Yes.